Bowers. I'm the director of the Ohio Small Business Development Center at Columbus State Community College. I want to welcome you to this edition of Small Business Breakthroughs. What we like to do here is bring on experts that can talk about different aspects of being a small business owner and hopefully provide you with some content, some instruction that will help you with your business. And I'm pretty sure that that's absolutely going to happen today. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling. We will be bringing our speaker, Teresa Stevenson, on in just a moment. But as always, I want to thank the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center, which is where I am sitting. I'm actually sitting in the cafe area of the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center. And I want to thank the center for their partnership on this program, their partnership in general. We've been working with the DEC for years and years, and want to bring Chaz Frutel, who is the director of the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center, on to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Mike. We appreciate it, and it's always been a pleasure to have small business development centers be a partner of the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center. We're in our 13th year now of operation at the DEC, and we're excited with what we've been able to offer the Central Ohio community. Back when we got started, we were the first entrepreneur center. Now there's been quite a few that have been around, some of them still around. And of course, over the last 5 years or so, the advent of more of your hotspot drop-in types of places like Cohatch and others. So Central Ohio has come a long, long way in being able to provide such great venues and services for small businesses. And of course, we are proud to be able to still continue that on behalf of the city of Dublin and Dark Points, who are our host for the facility and whatnot. So anybody that is interested, maybe finding a new home for their business, we have hotspots and cubicles and offices and things like that, and be very happy to provide those kind of services. And we do have some openings right now, so be happy to talk to anybody, and I'll provide my information in the chat area. But I'm very excited to hear Teresa's presentation today, and just look forward to, as always, a great hour of learning about keys to successful businesses. So thank you so much, Mike.
Thanks, Jess. You know, one of the things I always say that I like about the Dublin Entrepreneur Center, the DEC, is, you know, this kind of sense of community. So it's one of those where, yeah, there are people that have offices here, that have their own businesses here, but everybody kind of works together, kind of connects. You know, there's an opportunity, even if you're in a situation where it's like, hey, I don't need an office, but I'm working at home, and I do need a conference room every now and then, and I would like to be able to get out of the house once in a while. You know, Chaz has a number of different options that could be helpful to you. And even if you're not quite ready for the office, I would encourage you to kind of touch base with Chaz, because again, there's a lot of resources, a lot of knowledge that he can share with you. And before we get started, I'll just tell you a little story about community here at the DEC. And I told these guys already, but so I'm in here this morning, and like I said, we're in a cafe. We're trying to do something a little different. So I decide, I have the TV behind me. I'm going to slide this table I'm sitting at over, and you know, that'll slide me over a little bit so you can see the more of the slide. And me and one of the other individuals, Susie, who's actually on here, we start to slide this thing. I thought the table was moving. Well, it was just the top. It's like a big marble top. And all of a sudden the thing comes flying off. And luckily Susie's landed on the chair, and mine didn't go that far, but the community heard the ruckus and came running out of their offices to help us put it back. So again, great community. And I'm sure that Chaz won't let me do this again, but we
that's a good idea.
Well, all's well ends well, I guess. So so anyway, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to bring Teresa Stevenson on. She is our guest. She is the owner of All Things in Common, LLC. And Teresa has done a business clinic with us, which you can find on our YouTube channel. And this particular session will also be recorded and be on our YouTube channel. And we're going to talk about human resource issues today. And if anybody has questions that is here, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll keep an eye on the chat and see if we can answer those. Otherwise, we'll just kind of talk here and cover some issues that I know that I've run into in talking to small business owners. And I'm sure that, Teresa's worked with a number of small business owners too, that, these are issues that she runs into and gets to explain on a pretty regular basis. So, Teresa, thank you for being on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm certainly glad to be here today.
Great. So why don't we start out? Tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your background, and then we'll kind of jump in here.
So I have been in HR for over 20 years. I started my business a little while ago, actually earlier this year. So what I wanted to do was really help small business owners kind of either set up their HR departments or help those who really don't even have an HR department. And I am also able to help mid-sized companies who may have downsized and they have outsourced some of their HR functions, due to that downsizing. So HR certainly is a topic that I love. I enjoy. There's a lot of processes and things that go into HR. So I am certainly, willing and able to be helpful to any small business owner.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And again, we've talked, and then you were able to kind of work with Bruce and put that business clinic on, which again I thought was really, really good. So if you guys have HR issues beyond what we're going to talk about today, be sure you go check that out on our SBDC YouTube channel. But I told Teresa I may kind of deviate from the questions, so I'm actually going to deviate from the question before I start the questions. Based on what she said, one of the things she talked about is, working with small business owners that really don't have an HR department. And we're going to kind of get into this a little bit, but what do you see that the small businesses, they're kind of, maybe they're starting out as themselves, or maybe it's just them and partners, and then they decide they're going to start to do some things. What do you see as maybe just some of the basic mistakes or basic things that they should be thinking about, as they are thinking about, well, I need to get an employee, or I need to get employees? And we're going to go through a number of questions, but is there anything just kind of real basic stuff that kind of hits them and they call you and say, hey, I need to kind of think through these?
Yeah, the first thing I always ask them is, do you have a business plan? And the reason why I want to ask them that is not mainly for a financial aspect, but to find out, do you have a goal? Is there a need that you're trying to meet within the market? Have you done the research to even see if the market is asking for what it is you want to provide? If they're unable to answer those questions right away, then I do take some time to sit with them and ask them to go back and kind of even just come up with a generic business plan. I know there are certainly lots of them out there on Google where you can just kind of plug and play, put numbers and put things in, but the business plan will also ask them certain questions about their client demographic, about the products and services that they're offering, and that will give them a better understanding of what it is they want to do with the service or products that they are providing. So it isn't just, hey, I want to start a business, I have this great idea. Who's your competition? Is your competition within less than a mile down the road? Is that somewhere that you want to be? So these are all things that I will ask all of my clients when they call me for help and for information regarding just starting a business.
That's a great point. The business plan concept. And I think, we talk about business plans a lot. At Small Business Development Center, we work with folks to kind of identify their market, understand their markets, different things of that nature. But the thing I think that's also interesting is when we talk about the business plan, is that if you're going to bring on somebody as an employee, you're going to have to pay them, I'm thinking. And that's coming out of your revenue, and it's coming out of what you're doing. So the plan allows you to kind of make some projections of revenue so that you at least have an idea. Should I, from a financial standpoint, do I need an employee at this point, or do I just want an employee? or, if I bring them on, what kind of return on investment should they be doing? Maybe it's a sales position or something like that. That financial component also allows you to do that. And you can't really figure the financial stuff out unless you think about this stuff that you mentioned in terms of the market and the customers and stuff.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really stop to consider. I think that I'm certainly in their corner. I am their cheerleader. They kind of had this ideation of, oh, it's only going to take me a few months or maybe a couple years and then I'll be off the ground and running. Well, you're certainly not going to, open a party store right next to Party City, in direct competition with them. And they've been around for decades and you're just starting out. You'll really want to do some research if you want to open a party store. What kind of products and services are you going to offer? Is it something that's different than what Party City might offer? How many employees do you need? What will be your overall revenue that you're looking at? So you'll really want to do some research as far as like hiring your first employee, and even if you need an employee, when you first start out.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of brings me to kind of my initial question. So I'll get back on the list here of questions. So when somebody's thinking about, I need to bring on an employee, my experience is there's this conversation about, okay, should I actually bring on a W-2 employee, or am I better off to use a 1099 contractor to do this? And a lot of the times I hear people saying, okay, well, I want to use the 1099 contractor. Why is that? Because it's potentially cheaper for me, even though a lot of the benefits and the tax and the Social Security and all that, which you're not paying by not having a W-2, really is should be built into the contract amount. But they start to think, okay, it's going to be easier and it's going to be less work for me because I don't have to do withholding. I don't have to do any of that stuff. However, it's a good chance for you to get in trouble too. So,
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about, the kind of this 1099 contractor versus W-2 and what kind of differentiates and what people should be aware of?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought this up. This is a great question because this is the number one question people reach out to me for help with. Should I hire employees directly or go with an independent contractor, which we all know are 1099 workers? And it's not really cut and dry. It depends on what you need out of them and what your business needs. So a good rule of thumb is, if the work required is inconsistent, seasonal, or short-term, you'll most likely want to hire an independent 1099 worker. So independent contractors typically fill specific roles or do specialized projects and any work that you need on a regular basis, but remains limited in scope. That would require you to hire a 1099 worker. Now, they are responsible for paying their own employment taxes. They're responsible for paying their own income taxes. So if you're going to go this route, you're not going to withhold any, taxes from their paycheck. However, this is where people, I think, kind of get a little bit confused. So there are three main components to hiring a 1099 worker that they have to be aware of. First, you want to know, behavioral wise, does the contractor have the right to control what the worker does and how the worker, does their job? If the employer is controlling how the work is done, they are your employee. They're not an independent contractor. Okay. So you'll want to make sure, if you're giving them specific instructions and saying, I want it done this way, A, B, and C, I want you to follow this process, you're directing that work and they are your employee. They're not an independent contractor. Say, for instance, if I am a graphic designer and I have a computer and you are giving me access to, some type of Adobe or Canva or, Microsoft's PowerPoint or something that you want me to design all my projects in, and you're directing me on how to do that work, I'm your employee. I am not a contractor. If you were to say, okay, you can use Adobe or PowerPoint or Canva, and I just need a simple brochure. You're not directing me, you're just telling me what you need. And then I'm an independent contractor.
How does
The
that,
second,
let me ask you this for you. So where does the line kind of cut? So let's say that I'm working in that scenario with an independent contractor. So they got their own equipment, they're going to go off and do their own thing. But where does that line blur in terms of me saying, hey, I want a trifold, I want color, I want this, I want that. Where does that kind of blend, or are you aware?
So giving me or asking me questions and letting me know how you would like the finished product to be,
Right.
That's great. I am an independent contractor. If you're telling me how to go about achieving those results, I'm your employee. So the more instruction you give me on what the finished product should look like and how I should attain that goal, I'm your employee.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. Yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to jump in there, but I
Oh, no, that's fine. The second thing I wanted to say about that is financial. Meaning, if the business aspects of the worker's job, are they controlled, by your business? So independent contractors, let's say if you hire someone to come into your office, to do work, and you're allowing them to use your office space, they're on your Wi-Fi. And let's say, hey, you have bagels and donuts that day, you're allowing them to have bagels and donuts, and then there's an ice cream truck outside, they're going outside, they're enjoying all of the perks and benefits that your employees are enjoying, but they're an independent contractor. You want to be very careful, because typically the independent contractor, although you may invite them to enjoy, bagels and donuts, you should not be inviting them to go with you on, let's say, a team building event. Those perks are specifically for your employees, your W-4 employees. They're not for independent contractors. So you also want to make sure that if you're directing them to come into your office space and saying you have to complete the work here, you want to make sure you have something in writing that says they're an independent contractor. They're not my employees. So that's where some businesses kind of want to blur the lines. Oh, we have this extra space here. I hired a consultant. But if the consultant is enjoying all of the perks and benefits of your employees, they are an employee, and you want to be careful about that. The last thing I wanted to say, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're right.
Is the type of relationship. So is there, a written contract between the two of you? Is the contract stating that the employee, are you giving them a computer to do the graphic design? Are you paying for the licensing for them to use the Adobe suite? Is all of it, their equipment? So you want to be very careful when you give someone an assignment to allow them to use their own equipment and allow them to do the work on their time. If they have to clock in and out into your software that you use for all of your other employees, even though they're an independent contractor, they're your employee. And it's interesting because I just had this conversation yesterday with someone who I think may end up filing a form SS8, and I'll go into that a little bit in a minute. But so they're an independent contractor. They're in IT. They have their own equipment. They have their own software, things that they paid for so that they can do this work. And the business would like them to clock in and clock out using their human resources software. And I thought that was very interesting, because I said they're really, it's different if they are a store and they want you monitoring their equipment, between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. That's different. But if they're telling you your office hours are 9 to 5 and they want you to clock in and clock out per their human resources software, that's a fine line. You should really be able to complete this work from your home, 7 to 4, 8 to 3. They should not be requiring you to clock in and clock out. That would be considered an employee. those behaviors are typically aligned with an employee. Now, what a Form SS8 does is if you are a consultant and you accept a job from someone and they are deeming you as a 1099 worker, but at the end of the year, you've clocked in and clocked out, you've used their equipment, you've used their office space, you've engaged in a lot of employee perks, and you thought, they didn't take out any taxes, but all these other things that I'm doing mirror that of an employee. I think I want to go to the IRS and just see if I was their employee or if I was a 1099 worker. And that's where you would fill out a Form SS8. And it's on the IRS's website. And it's just, you go through a series of questions that they ask you. Did you do this? Did you do that regarding your scenario? And it'll take them, it's not quick, like about 4 to 6 months to give you a determination. And they'll make that based on how you answer those questions. So I always tell companies to be very sure that your contract is cut and dry with your independent contractors. And after I have these conversations, then they go back and then they say, okay, I think I need to rethink if I want to hire someone, because there's all this other, backstory that they didn't consider between an employee and an independent contractor.
Right. So the SS8, who's filling that out? The independent contractor, and then they're submitting it?
Actually, either the business can or the independent contractor can. So either party can fill out that form and they'll answer a series of questions on that form, and the IRS will say, yes, they were actually your employee and you should have taken out taxes, or no, you're an independent contractor and you're fine with the relationship that you had.
Okay. So to that point, so one thing that we always think about, so we also have business clinics on our YouTube channel from Melanie Bryant from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. So she talks a lot about this kind of 1099 W-2 employee relationship as it relates to workers' compensation, but it's the same, what makes it is the same kind of thing. So as a small business owner, I think what's important to note is that, one, if you're treating them like an employee, if they look like an employee, if they're acting like an employee, if they're doing employee stuff, even if you're a town going to 1099, they're probably an employee. So know that. Now, your point about the SSA. So I don't know what's going on since COVID, but I know prior to COVID, there was more reviews of these types of things happening, and businesses were the IRS, and they were looking at it, trying to ascertain, are these employees or not employees? There were more of these types of reviews or audits happening. Now, I don't know what's going on with COVID now, but I also know that one of the biggest ways that a small business can get into problems doing this is when the independent contractor comes back and says exactly what you said, hey, I should be getting, they should be doing the withholding. They should be doing these types of things and all that. And then maybe they fill out the SS8, or they go to, an attorney, or they go someplace else. And all of a sudden, you're, as a small business owner, you're kind of mixed into a mess here trying to fix that. And I'm assuming, in addition, it could be a situation where, in addition to just, hey, paying the back withholding and doing all that kind of stuff, there could be some other legal issues with that too. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. Because I think the first mistake business owners make is, how can I hire someone and save money?
Right.
And just wanting to use a blanket 1099, I'll just make everybody a 1099, could end up costing you more in the long run, because not only will you have to go back and pay all those taxes, you could have fines and penalties on top of that. So it's not a cheaper route. It's almost a cheaper route to just hire 1 or 2 employees to save yourself money, headache, in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where I think it's really important. I think that people need to, really think about what they're doing and really think about their business and what they're doing, I mean, let's don't just, okay, I can kind of skirt the system a little bit here and do a 1099. And I think the other thing that I hear a lot, and I hear it from kind of the independent contractor types, where we're talking to them and different things, and we're saying, maybe kind of saying, hey, you might want to think about how you're doing this or what's going on here. Or we're talking to the small business and they have an independent contractor, and this independent the small business, we say, okay, this looks like an employee, you could have an issue, you need to think about this. And they say, okay, well, this guy or woman, they do independent contract in different places. And I think that's important too. It's not just, they're not just one person. If they've got multiple assignments or multiple engagements, that helps. But what I hear a lot is, they're out at the limited, or they're out someplace else and they're acting as a 1099. So if the limited says it's okay, it's got to be okay for me. So I don't know, that's certainly not true. But just because it's happening in one place doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And you don't know what's going on there. You're hearing it maybe from the independent contractor, but you don't know everything else that's happening. So I would say, look at your situation and don't just, hey, this is going on here, I should be fine.
Yes, I totally agree. Yes, don't look at what someone else is doing and think that applies to you, because every situation is different. And even what worked for you in the first year of your business may not work for you in year 5. So always look at your situation independently of any other external factors that are going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So so let's kind of shift a little bit now away from this 1099 concept, but maybe talking more about employees, because that's kind of where we're here. Also, anybody that has questions or anything, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that. But so somebody decides, okay, they're gonna start hiring employees, and there's some things that they need to do with the state or the IRS or the feds, and that's I like to think that's more of a mechanical kind of thing. I can say, here's how this works, but so let's say you're doing all of that correctly. When you're trying to find the employees, so there's always this, I hear a lot of this, and this has really been going on, since, the pandemic and everything else. I mean, finding employees and recruiting employees, selecting the right employees. And while it's getting a lot more play right now, I've heard this for years that, how do I find employees? How do I kind of do this? And when we start thinking about recruiting employees, what thoughts do you have for the small business person? Probably hasn't done this before, or even if they have done it, maybe they're saying, okay, I need to get 2 or 3 people or whatever. How do I best go and recruit and kind of think through who the best people are?
So what I like to tell my clients, there are a few key factors that you want to consider beyond the resume. So many people get caught up on these beautiful, well-written resumes, and they're gorgeous. I love them. However, you want to look at talent and cultural fit. If you've selected 10 people out of 36 that you want to move forward with an interview on, when you're in that interview, you want to ask them, how well do they understand your customer base? Did they do their homework and look up your company? Are they familiar with your mission and your values? Are they familiar with your history and why you even started the company? If it's just an employee or a candidate that's coming in thinking they're going to be an employee and, believing that, hey, I'm just going to try to make small talk with the interviewer, find out what they like, let's see what we have in common. And too often when that happens, the interviewer is kind of swept up into the conversation, oh, hey, you like the Blue Jackets? I love the Blue Jackets. And then the next thing you know, you spend the next 20 minutes, comparing stories And you don't even know if this candidate is a great cultural fit because they're looking to get the job. They're looking to get hired as the employee. A good rule of thumb is when you go into that interview, if the candidate starts to ask you about your history, your mission, your values, you know you're onto something, and they will be a great cultural fit for what you have because they're interested. You know, they don't just want to come and job hop or come, you know, and be there for a season. They want to stay for the long haul. You also, I like to tell people that working interviews, I don't think that they're popular, but I think they should be. So give them a relevant task. If you're hiring someone who's going to be a trainer, you know, at their second interview, ask them to do a quick 5-minute presentation on a topic of their choice and really sit back and view what their training skills are. Are they able to present the content the way it should be presented? You know, are you walking away from the presentation with a good understanding of what the topic was? And are you taking those relevant skills away, having learned something new with that topic? And I can't stress enough, look beyond the resume. Like I said, resumes are beautiful. That may get you in the door. It may get you that first the phone interview. But again, they're trying to get your attention, not necessarily, hey, I want you to look at this and consider me. I'm trying to get hired just from this piece of paper, which is great. And resumes are relevant, but you want to look beyond it and don't be dazzled by the pictures and the beautiful fonts and graphics and everything, because you really want someone who's going to understand your customer base and kind of be an extension of you, because you cannot be all things to all people when you're running a small business. You also want to focus on the future. So when you look at those resumes and you were in the interview, spend time asking them about their the future and where they see themselves in your company, and less time on their past accomplishments. Sometimes we'll look at the past accomplishments and again, we'll be dazzled by, wow, you know, they've accomplished this, that, and the other. But what was their most recent success? What are they most proud of within the last 6 months? You really want to focus on, you know, have them focus on the future and where they see themselves in your company. And then finally, I would like to tell my clients to look for someone who has an open mind. So go back through all of your candidates' responses and indicate and see if anyone has given you any kind of feedback on things that ideas they may have, or things they may do differently, or a process they may say, hey, this is going to cut your 8-step process down to 5. You know, those are the types of things you want to look at when you are trying to whittle down all of those resumes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple things that I thought I took out of there that were really important, and we're all really important. One is you need to apply them and what they bring to your opportunity, and don't get focused on the history. So you mentioned that, but you know, I know that, for example, in our type of business with the SBDC, so we work with small businesses. We work with a lot of them. It's, you know, it's moving a lot. We may have somebody who's a successful entrepreneur apply for an advisor position, but they've never done this kind of thing. So while they've been a great entrepreneur, and on paper this looks great, and it looks like somebody that could be applied, you know, to what we do, because we work with entrepreneurs, they've never done advising, they've never done consulting, they've never worked by the hour and, you know, tracked stuff, different things like that. So to be able to take somebody and say, okay, I see your background and that's great. Now, how is that going to fit to your particular business? I think is really, really important. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, I love this idea of giving them a task. I hadn't really thought about that. So like, for example, Ellen Harvey is on our team, and we hired her. Had I thought to give her a task, maybe I'd have said, I don't know if I want to bring her on, but no, I'm kidding. Actually, she does a great job. But talk about the difference between giving them a task and then just giving them some sort of blanket test.
So I call it a working interview. And I would typically suggest my clients do this on maybe the second or a third. Don't go past 3 interviews because then you're just wasting the candidate's time. The second or third interview, by that third interview, you should really know if you want to bring this person on.
Right.
So having them do a relevant task to see how well they interact with, whether it's software or some type of a product or process, you're trying to find, well, how would they figure out how to do this? How would this process go for them from A to Z or 1 to 10?
Right.
Such as with the trainer. This person is going to be training all of your employees. Do they even have presentation skills? That's something important that you want to know. Are they able to just take a topic and run with it? Do the research, because it takes 10 hours to make 1 hour of training content. 10 hours for 1 hour of training content. Are they able to, on the fly, be able to pick that up and curate training that not only your employees can walk away with something and remember the training? You're not just in there telling. Training isn't telling. The first job of a learning and development professional is to change how someone does something, right? So you're not just in there telling people, you know, A equals B equals C, and then you get this result. You're saying, so let's think about this process. Let's think about how this would go. And if they can't do that, that's not your trainer. They may have a beautiful resume. They may have worked in a training environment, but if they're not able to take a topic, do research, curate the content, and then make it relevant to the audience, where when the audience walks away, they know how to do whatever was taught in the presentation, that's not your trainer. That's why it's so important on certain jobs to actually have a working interview.
Yeah.
As far as testing goes, testing works, I believe, in certain industries. It does not work across the board.
Yeah.
I don't understand why a company believes it's a great idea to give someone who's going to be answering your phones, answering your doors, and making appointments a 50-question algebra quiz.
Right.
I have never, I'm not in science, I have never used algebra since the day I left my high school. And I'm okay with that. So why is that relevant to that employee, to that candidate? That would not work. That to me speaks bias. Well, I'm going to give all of my, candidates this test, and whoever passes the test, that's who's going to move on. Well, you've just disqualified about 75% of your candidates, because a lot of them are going to say, why are you testing me? I'm just coming in to answer your phone. I don't understand this. So testing works in certain industries, not across the board.
Right. So let me ask you this. So one of the things that you also do is that you're a DiSC, kind of personality test practitioner. Where would you consider putting that in? So would you have, you get to the third interview, would you have somebody do that, or what are your thoughts there?
No, that's not what DiSC is for. So DiSC is really the acronym. It's for the personality styles that make up the DISC. So it's for the behaviors. There's dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. So it's a little bit different than Myers-Briggs. So Myers-Briggs assumes that personality is fixed and it's not likely to change, right? So DiSC is more open to the possibility that in different situations, environments will bring out different results and different behavioral traits in an individual. So I would only use DiSC in a company where a client is already established and you have employees working together, but there's no cohesiveness. So it's really used more for communication effect, resolution, better leadership skills, and really teamwork. So I would not recommend using DISC as something you would give a candidate that you're looking to hire. That's really more for team building. But I do know companies that will use these tests for candidates. And even in the DISC manual, very early on in the training, it says this is not a tool to use for hiring. But I think a lot of employers are not understanding really the hiring process. So they're using these tests, they're using personality, quizzes and skills to try to whittle something down, when really, in my mind, you just need to figure out if they are a good cultural fit. Have they done their homework? Do they understand your customer base? And then finally, you can really ask the candidate, how will you working for me make you a better person or make you be who you ultimately want to be?
Absolutely.
If they cannot articulate that response or really tell you what that response is, they may not be the right fit for you.
Yeah. I just want to kind of reiterate what you said, for the small business owner, if you're interviewing people to come on to into your organization, you need to figure out if they're going to be a fit. So you should come up with a set of maybe questions and use those same questions with everybody so that you could compare, kind of apples to apples, and, get them to interact with you, because especially if the job requires them to kind of be interactive and things, that's important. But I see a lot of small business owners, I see a lot of people that are interviewing, period. What they do is that they just get into this, I'm going to tell you how great the company is, and I want to convince you to come and work here. And then they walk out of the interview and you don't really know if they're going to fit.
Absolutely. Yes, I do also advise my clients not to go on and on and on about their company. We know your company is great. That's why you're in business. You're providing products and services to your client base. Wonderful. Look beyond that. Maybe allow the candidate to sell you on why they would be a good fit for your customer base.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we got a little bit of time left. I want to go into one other area. I want to talk about, so small business, maybe they've hired a couple people or they're thinking about hiring a couple people. Can we talk a little bit about, one, the creation of employee policies, and then how those policies kind of interact with this employee manual concept? So, I mean, you've heard the Indeed commercials, I think, where they're on there, and they come on and, hey, I had this happen and I don't even have an employee manual, or I don't have a policy. What am I supposed to do? Things like that. I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of, one, the employee manual, but two, also creating these policies that are going to allow you to address certain issues?
Right. Great question. So there should be, I tell my clients, there should be at least six must-have policies for your employee manual. First and foremost, you want to have a code of conduct. You want to go over ethics, if you have a dress code, if they need to wear a uniform, what their attendance requirements are. You really want to set those expectations and establish any consequences for not meeting those expectations. And then number two, this is so crucial, you want to have a communications policy. If you are providing your employees with a laptop, a cell phone, or any device that connects to the internet, I cannot stress this enough, write a policy for how you want those devices to be used by your employee during work time and after work hours. So just because you give a laptop to Jane Doe and they go home and it's 7 o'clock and they are done and they are checking their LinkedIn feed and they see something and they get all fired up and they're using your company laptop to fire back at something that fired them up, it's not a good scenario. So you
Yeah.
want to have those really tight communications policies. You also want to be sure if you're providing a cell phone that they're not in one of your offices taking a selfie with another employee who has agreed to that selfie, but there's other employees in the background. And now this is on your Facebook page, and then someone hits up someone they see in the background, because this actually did happen. Oh, I see that you're in, John Doe's photo on his Facebook page. And this person said, I had no idea John Doe took a photo of me. John Doe didn't, but John Doe was in the background.
Yeah.
So you want to have a super, super tight communications policy, because that could really land you in hot water. Are you allowing them to post on social media? If they're not in your marketing department and they don't have guidelines, they should not be posting on social media or accessing their personal email, on your company time. So you want to make sure you have a super, super, super airtight communications policy. Number 3, you want to have a non-discrimination policy. You want to know how your employees are going to handle, being in a diverse atmosphere. You're not going to tolerate discrimination, or harassment, sexual harassment, or any form of that. You want to have that in your policy as well. Number 4, you want to lay out your compensation and benefits. You'll also want to stress after 30, 60, 90 days will allow you to join, if there's a 401k, give them that timeline, and then follow up with them to see if they actually want to. If they're going to decline, get that in writing. Don't get a verbal declination. Make sure they decline that in writing. Number 5, you want to have a new hire and separation policy. So you'll want to provide the basic terms of employment when they start, and then for that offboarding process, this is what you can expect, if you're offboarding. You want to have that in your policy as well. And then finally, you want to have that acknowledgement of receipt. Everyone gets the employee handbook, and then they're supposed to peruse it, and at the very last page, sign it, tear that off, and make a copy and give that back to your employee, so that if anything were to ever happen or any questions, you can always go back and say, well, you did sign the employee policy, the employee handbook that says that you can't post to social media. You were doing this at lunchtime. I understand Susie and you took a selfie, but John Doe was in the back, and John Doe's now on your Facebook page. Can you please take that down? And that'll be a violation of your policy. So those 6 things, I cannot stress enough, are really must-haves for any employee manual.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that your point about the communication tools, the laptops, phones, et cetera, there's probably a number of businesses that had everybody sitting in the office working on desktops prior to 2020. And then, they were forced to move them remote. So all of a sudden, these individuals ended up with these remote tools. They ended up with laptops. They ended up with phones, and, they had different, working with Zoom and different things like that, that still are in place. Maybe not at the 2020 level, but, maybe they're still having some remote, they're doing some different things, and they're still using this equipment. So I think what you said is really critical for the business to go back and reevaluate where they are now compared to where their actual manual is.
Right, absolutely. They should revisit those communications policies. Now, some businesses, which, maybe are not into so much as marketing, will allow employees to say, okay, so you're in this hybrid environment. And I know one business in particular who does this, that says, so where are you working from today? And then the employee will take a picture of, themselves sitting out by the river, or they'll take a picture, hey, I'm working from Panera Bread today. So, and I think that's fine. I think that does build camaraderie with their, other employees and people, within their office. But I certainly wouldn't, promote anyone do that unless they have written permission from their employer. But they would need to go and revisit those policies.
Yeah, absolutely. And it probably makes sense for the employer to revisit the policy, but also then to revisit them with the employee, have them re-review it.
Absolutely.
Even if they make some tweaks to the policy manual or the employee manual, then they need to update the manual that the individual has. Should they then sign kind of an amendment? Hey, I got the update on this date.
Yes, always get that acknowledgement of receipt that they went over the revisited policy, they've seen the updates, they understand them, and make them sign off and give them a copy so that a copy is in their file, and then the employee themselves has a copy to take home with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I got one more question and then we're gonna wrap up here. And this is like super easy question. How do you determine how much to pay people?
Do you value work? I tell people, do you value work? If you don't value work, typically those offers are going to come in very low. So if you value the work that people do, if you value people, you will pay them not only what they're worth, but what your customer base is worth. I have one client who is trying to decide between $13 and $15 an hour. And I said, just remember that there are certain companies that even are starting people at $17 an hour. You may need to bump it up a little bit if you really value work and you value your customer base.
Right, absolutely. And then I think it's important for the employer to at least have some sort of sense of the market rates. So again, you're not paying 12, everybody else is paying 17, but you don't know everybody else is paying 17. Then you're like, okay, I can't figure out why anybody's here, or I can't figure out why everybody I get is not of high quality. And I see these other people doing this and they're great. Why can't I get these great people?
Yeah, I encourage my clients to hire an outside firm who will do what's called a pay audit.
Okay.
And what they do is they gather all this data and information from companies who do the exact same or similar thing that you do within your area. And then they will present that data to you and tell you, typically, companies pay are like maybe 40 to 60% less than what the client is offering to pay. Then the client has to go back and make a really hard decision. So either I need to increase my prices so I can meet that, or I need to go back and revisit, if I can't afford that pay increase, because I do value what I do. And I want people that come in to understand that they value, because you don't want to hire someone where this is a second job because they need that extra money, but you're not able to provide them anything above $12 an hour. That's always going to be a second job because no one can afford to pay bills, car maintenance, and everything else coming to them on $12 an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. And, given the economic shifts that are going on now and will continue to go on, it's important that you do those types of evaluations to understand what's going on. Then as the owner, you get to make the decision.
Right.
How you want to do it. So that's great. Teresa, what's the best place for folks to find you? Where would you recommend they go? We do have your LinkedIn linked on the event listing, but where should they go?
So my website is allthingsincommon.llc.com. And then also they can reach out to me. I have a company page and I have all of my information on my company page as well. They can call me. They can send me a message through my webpage. So I'm always available. And I want people to understand that when they call me, if they're just asking a question, I'm not charging them for that. I generally want to help people get established and not make mistakes when they're just starting out, or even if they've been established and they really have just this question that's been bugging them, they just need a quick answer to. I'm available to help. It's only when you hire me to consult is when I start to charge, but people reaching out to me, asking me a question, I don't charge for that.
All right, that's great. That's great. So I have one more question, but I do want to, before we close up, I want to thank the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center for their support and allowing us to be partners with them in a variety of different initiatives, as well as being able to actually do the small business breakthrough sessions from the Dublin Entrepreneurial Session. So thanks to the deck, thanks to Chaz. And again, as I mentioned before, if you have an interest in office space, you're a small business owner, or you just kind of want to start to plug into the community here at the deck, I think the website is DEC in Dublin.com. You can go there and find a bunch of information, or you can reach out directly to Chaz Fertel here at the deck, and he'd be happy to chat with you. Teresa, my final question. So for small businesses that are kind of getting into the employee game, starting to look at, I need to get employees, I want to get employees, it may be even ones that have been in business that, I'm going to have some employees. What's something that you would recommend that they start to implement, right away that could help them either in any aspect of this, either in the recruiting and the selection, or just the, working with the existing employees to continue to improve their performance and their commitment to the organization?
I would always recommend that business owners, any business owner, whether you're new or you've been around forever, to go back, look at your mission statement, look at your values, and see if they still align when you're hiring people. You started out for a reason. You wanted to offer a product or service for a reason. Human resources has changed even within the past 5 years. It's now really referred to as people operations. People are really the heart and soul of why any company, business, or product is successful. It's why we're on this Zoom call today, because there was a person who came up with this idea, and then they needed other people around them to help them grow the idea. So I would always encourage business owners to consider the value people will bring to the table. Consider that employee journey from start to finish and how they'll help you grow your customer base. That's something that you can't put a dollar amount on, is the value that people will bring to grow your customer base.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what business is. I mean, it's really all about people. It's about the internal people that are doing the work and are connecting with your customers. And it's about the customers, and most of those customers are people too. So, definitely something to think about. So we're going to wrap up here. I want to thank everybody for participating and joining us. The Small Business Development Center, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is Ohio SBDC, and you can find all of the small business breakthroughs along with a number of other videos. And I wanted to mention one other thing. On December 9th, 2022, we will be holding the Ohio SBDC's Capital Crash Course. It's a capital conference on funding your business and prepping your business and getting it ready to receive funding, different things of that nature. It runs from 10 to 3. You can find that at sbdccolumbus.com, and it's a free event, and it's definitely valuable. I think this is the 16th year we've done it, and always gets rave reviews, and I know it always helps people build and grow their businesses. So thanks to Teresa, thanks to Chaz, thanks to Bruce and our other team at the SBDC, and we look forward to seeing you next month at Small Business Breakthroughs. Thanks a lot.